This is my 70s era garage wall cabinet that I pulled out of here over the summer, and it's time to make something new out of it. So today we're gonna take this once kitchen cabinet turned garage cabinet and flip it once more into a console table for our basement. So let's get started.
Before we fully dive into this transformation, let me give you a quick overview of what we're working with here. As you can see, this cabinet is a bit worse for wear, but I think it still has plenty of life left in it. So as soon as I get it up off the floor, we can get started. Once I finally managed to get the cabinet to cooperate, it was time to disassemble everything and clean the last 50 years of grime off this thing. And just like that, we're ready to get to work. The back of this cabinet was full of holes, and it was going to take way more time to fill those and fix them than it was to just replace it with a new sheet of MDF. So here I am pulling the pieces apart so I can get this back off and replace it.
Well, that works, I guess.
Now with the back out of the way and stored for future projects, it's time to clean up this cabinet. Next, I moved on to cutting MDF panels to cover the failing plywood on either side of the cabinet body. I planned out my cuts on this full sheet of MDF so I can use it for the side panels and have enough left over for the new back piece. The original plywood sides are still structurally in good shape, but there's a lot of surface damage, so I figured covering them over with this MDF would be the best way to get a clean finish on the final product. I cut each one of the side pieces about 1/2 inch longer and wider than I need, so I don't have to worry about lining them up exactly right during the glue up. I'll just come back in with my router to trim off the excess.
Does this look stupid? Absolutely it does. Does it work?
Questionable. Once the glue had set for a while, I pulled the weights off and got ready to trim everything up. What I didn't know is that my grand plan to trim everything afterwards was about to blow up in my face.
Oh, well. This was supposed to make it easier.
Let me walk you through what just happened. I was originally planning to trim the top edge of this MDF first, so I wasn't worrying so much about where my router bearing would ride because there was a lot of material for it to roll across. Then, when I decided to trim the side up first instead, I didn't adjust the depth of my router bit, so the bearing wasn't riding on anything, allowing me to cut basically wherever I wanted, which is exactly what I did. In the end, I just cut a little piece of wood to match the divot I had made and glued it in place. Once it's dry, I'll be able to shape it, and hopefully once the project is done, you won't even be able to tell where I messed up. I've heard it said that the mark of a good woodworker isn't in doing things perfectly, but in learning how to fix the mistakes you make along the way. So this is just practice. While I waited for the new piece to dry, I moved over to the other side panel, and being very careful to set my router correctly, I trimmed off the excess. Once the repair was finally dry, I put a skim coat of wood filler on to hide any gaps, and then I shaped the piece to match the rest of the cabinet. Honestly, it was looking really smooth, and I was confident some primer and paint would make it all disappear. But before I could test that theory, it was time to move on to cutting the new top. This top is made out of leftover birch plywood I had kicking around from a previous project. To clean up the look, we added some matching edge banding, and then we'll be staining the entire thing in the color Early American. And once that was done, I called it quits for the night, and the next day started on the long-awaited priming. I'm not actually going to be priming the entire cabinet here, just these MDF panels because they're so porous. Everything else should be okay with 2 coats of paint. And in case you're curious, here's how the repair was looking after 1 coat of primer. While we wait for the primer to dry, let's get the first coat of paint onto the brace pieces and shelves that I fixed up earlier. These are all in decent shape, so after a couple coats of paint, these should be good to go. And here's how they were looking after a first coat.
We're back! Let's get painting!
Now it's time to do the same thing with the cabinet. And let me tell you, it was so satisfying to cover over that hot mess. Once the cabinet was dry and ready, I glued the brace pieces back into place in preparation for attaching the back panel. Then we got the new back panel in place and shot a bunch of brad nails into it to secure it. We were getting really close to finished at this point, but there was still one last big to-do on the list.
It's time to talk about table legs and how we're going to handle them for this project. So originally I was thinking I would want to use these legs, which I picked up at a thrift store, honestly like 3 or 4 years ago, and I've just been hanging on to waiting for the right project. The problem is they are way too long for what we're going for here. So that said, I hit the Home Depot and I found these. These are 2-inch walnut legs made for bed frames, but I think they're going to be perfect. If you're using a prefab leg like this, you pretty well either use something like a mounting plate, which is what I ended up picking up, or you use threaded inserts. The problem that I have is this bolt is going to be way too long to fit nice and flush against the cabinet. So I think what I'm going to have to do is actually cut these threads. So I guess let's just go ahead and do that now.
I'm gonna save you from watching me struggle to cut these. As you can see, the first one I actually messed up in the process, but it's okay. We'll just put that one on the back where no one's gonna see it. As a finish for this piece, I'm using furniture wax over the paint to provide some extra protection. Then, off camera, I applied my favorite diamond varathane to the top. All that was left now was to move the 2 pieces inside and get the top glued down. We decided to do this in the house instead of the garage because we have a pretty tight corner to maneuver around, so it was just easier to do this as 2 pieces. Once we were inside, I laid my glue down the center of the tabletop and then smushed it around once the top was in place to ensure good coverage. Then we popped some weight on it and let it set up for 24 hours. The finishing touch was to add all the shelves, organize a few board games in there, and then it was done. Let's take a moment to remember what this cabinet used to look like. And how it looks now. Even the repair point looks great.
And there you have it, a worse for wear garage cabinet transformed into a brand new console table. It's gonna get so much use down here. It's somewhere to put all our board games, it's somewhere to hold drinks and snacks when we're watching a movie, and I really think we gave this piece a new lease on life. So thanks for following along, and until next time, don't be an axe hole.